Area.
And for those of you in our studio audience, for those that would like to speak at the public hearing, please sign your name and we will call you up when I'm done with my presentation. I'm not sure why the crowds aren't here. This, for some of you, might be your first public hearing. And the way we do public hearings is it's how you make your recommendations to the City Council is you read up on all the materials that we send you. You get to ask staff any clarifying questions on the topic before we open it up to public comment. Then you hear the public comment and you ponder and see if you need any clarifications again from staff with the new information perhaps that's been presented. And then you talk amongst yourselves and you can make a motion and discuss the motion and all that kind of thing, and then that's when you get to vote. If we have questions along the way, feel free to ask about any part of the procedure. We're all going to just learn together. No worries at all. That's the beauty of PPC is we're pretty informal. Okay, so I'm going to start out. It's a public hearing tonight on a comprehensive plan amendment. We're allowed to amend the comprehensive plan once a year according to the state, and the exception is if you adopt something with your annual budget, you can do that in addition to your one a year. So we'll actually be doing the budget one with the capital facilities element at the end of the year, and this one in the middle of the year. So we're going to do two this year. But since one is with the budget, it's okay. It fits within the state requirements. So our first comprehensive plan of the year is the proposed removal of a potential annexation area from the city. Back when growth management was done in 1990s, one of the first things we did was all the cities had what we called potential annexation areas outside their cities, and those would be the areas within 20 years that the cities had to commit to annex and provide them with sewer, water, police and fire, and all those urban services, and the areas outside the urban growth line would be available only for rural services like sheriff. The water would be like well water kind of things, not the urban services, and that was supposed to save some money for municipal governments for service provision. And so the county would be in charge of like recreation and open space, that kind of thing regionally, and the cities would be in charge of police, fire, those kinds of urban services. So this is the Klahanie PAA as it is now, and these are the remaining city PAAs that are left. Back in 1990, those of you that were here would know that this Highlands was a PAA, Tallis over to the west was a PAA. There was an area down south here. Was a PAA, Park Point was a PAA, South Cove, Greenwood Point was a PAA. So we've been north Providence Point, North Issaquah. We've been really busy with annexing since growth management in the early 90s. So the comprehensive plan amendment today before you is to remove the Klahanie PAA, and by removing it, then it would be available for Sammamish to take it into their PAA and try to annex it. As I said, we've had it, Klahanie's been in our PAA since we first adopted our growth management consistent comprehensive plan back in 1995. We did a big study in 2004 to see what the impact of its annexation to the city would be with revenues and all the projections and how much it would cost us to serve them. We had a vote with them and with Greenwood Point. I point to Joan because she was very involved in that part of the Greenwood Point South Cove annexation and was on the study team. We had the vote. The Klahanie vote failed. The South Cove vote did not fail, and so the City Council took in South Cove Greenwood Point and did not take in Klahanie. Several years later, we were asked again by the Klahanie residents. We updated the study. We had another vote. Again, it narrowly missed. Council pondered for a little bit. What should they do? Should they try to take part? Should they think about it for a while? Should they wait and try it again? And they decided that they would have a discussion with Sammamish, City of Sammamish, and figure out if there was some more regional issues that could be better served with both of us working together, and part of that discussion was to switch the Klahanie PAA to Sammamish. And so I believe I put that in your packet so you could see all the different pieces of that agreement that the city councils put together. And so part of what has to happen to remove the Klahanie PAA is to go through the process, and so that begins with you all. As I mentioned last time we were together, it is extremely rare for you to receive direction from the council that seems predetermined. I've been here over 20 years, and this is only the second time that I can think of when council took an action and then they sent it to PPC and said, could you process this, please? You know, it seems backwards, it is backwards, but that just happens to be the way that this particular project is going, because I think because we've tried so many times that this is sort of the next step that they want to take with Klahanie. And again, you can totally vote against it. You can recommend against it. That's totally in your purview. And they would be disappointed if you didn't vote with, you know, your head and your heart and all the things you're supposed to vote with. It doesn't mean you have to rubber stamp it. They still want to hear your opinion and why. It's just very odd that there's an agreement out here and that we're processing it. It doesn't happen very often. So I don't want you to feel that you're just a rubber stamp, because you're not. So tonight,
I have one question on the 2005 vote. What was the percentage breakdown as far as that vote, if you recall?
What the council had said back then, it was interesting. There were two questions on the ballot. One was, do you want to be part of the city of Issaquah? And the second one was, do you want to take, or are you willing to take the bonded indebtedness? And they said, the council was very clear when they set that and said, we need a majority, or it had to be way up there for them both. They both had to pass by a certain amount for council to say yes. And South Cove came in with, you know, flying colors. They came above both of the bars that council set. But Klahanie, the vote, yes, we want to be in the city, came in above the bar, but the will you take our bonded indebtedness did not come above the bar. And so when they looked at it, that South Cove followed the directions and did what they were supposed to do, and Klahanie didn't quite do it. Even though council could have taken Klahanie, but not with the bonded indebtedness, they said, you know, it just didn't seem equitable, because South Cove, because there were two votes on the same day and one of them seemed to understand it and the other group, you know, didn't. So they chose not to take Klahanie because they didn't reach the bar on both of them. Can you remember what the percentages were? I'm sure I have it somewhere. I didn't bring it, but it was.
I think the annexation vote passed about 65% yes, and bonded indebtedness failed. I want to say
it was in the 40s.
Yeah, it was like 45 or 47% in that area. So.
Okay, and that answers my question. My question was geared towards whether the most recent vote was a decrease in support or an increase over the last vote.
No, well, this vote, there only was one question. Will you annex with the bonded indebtedness? And that one failed by 31 votes, right? It was 30-something votes. It was a handful of votes. So, but we only had one question this time. We thought we're going to make it really clear cut this time, and it failed. So that it was a lot of work. We went through a lot of work and outreach and all those good things, and just still missed it just by an oomph. So tonight we get to talk about that a little bit in the public hearing, and also as I mentioned, we only get this one shot to do comp plan amendments until December when we do the budget piece. There are two things that already happened that we wanted to tuck into this amendment as sort of housekeeping amendments, and one is the Central Issaquah Plan. We wanted to put those numbers in the population and housing projection chart, because since the central plan already was adopted, and people often say, well, your population chart's off. Well, it's off because we haven't been able to do the comp plan amendments yet, you know, because they don't always go together. So we updated that, and we also, there was an annexation that happened right at the end of the year. It was right before you all adopted the comp plan amendments last year. it was just missed it by this much. It was almost the last day of the year. And so we tucked that in because that's also in the housing and population chart. So we fixed that as well on this because we thought, wow, we're amending that table anyway. We should make it as correct as we can. So those two pieces are in there as well. And your role, as I mentioned before, talk amongst yourselves, listen to the public comments that I don't think will take a long time tonight. Ask clarifying questions, and then make a recommendation through your voting, and then look at the findings of fact and see if those express the thoughts that you have on it. If you're curious what happens next, if this, as it goes to the council, the council would have to approve the amendment to remove it. Then the Sammamish City Council has to make an amendment to their PAAs to add it. King County has to agree to change the PAA map that they have, because they're the keeper of all the PAAs, from Issaquah to Sammamish. And then it goes to the Growth Management Planning Council, which is all of the regional jurisdictions. They have to ratify that the PAA changes. So it's quite an elaborate process. And if it does all work through, the annexation vote may come up maybe at the end of 2015, depending on how all the ducks in a row fit for everything, because there's a lot of ducks here. Are there questions about what happens tonight? If you can get through it tonight, it goes to the council June 2nd. The committee, the land use committee, will talk about it on the 10th. And we're hoping that there'd be final action, at least from our council, July 7th. Okay. Oops. And this is the new and improved population chart. I know it's probably too small to see, but it's in your packet. And this is just one of the maps without Klahanie in the top corner. But all the maps and everything are in your packet. Any questions for me before we open up the public hearing? Yes, sir.
Trish, can you explain, I know I'm reading ahead on the findings of fact.
Yes.
It states evaluation of Klahanie PAA,
Potential annexation area.
right? Update the comprehensive plan to potentially reach part or all.
That's what the docket said when the council did the...
What does that mean? What part would we keep, or?
That was, okay, when we did the docket in January and February, we didn't have the vote yet. The vote was in February, and council said, if we didn't know what would happen, and so they kept that on there to say that, not knowing what the vote was going to happen, that if something happened and the vote failed, they weren't sure what they would do, so they kind of put all their options in the little box in the docket to say, well, maybe we'd keep some, maybe we wouldn't keep some, but they didn't want to have that discussion before the vote was final and certified.
So shouldn't this be then changed to release?
Well, no, that's still what the docket says. The docket they adopted says that they're going to take some sort of action on Klahanie this year.
Okay.
Sadly, we can't go back and change the docket. That's a once-a-year thing.
There's still a question on the one area that was over 80% positive.
Oh,
that maybe why that's still in there?
Well, that's why they had it in there before it was certified, because there was talk right after the vote was certified, because the area to the south came in, the numbers were very high to annex to Issaquah. And so for one work session, the council looked at what would it take to just serve that area and annex that area. And they talked all about it, and they thought there was just a lot of issues with alienating the rest of the area, and there were a lot of issues. So they decided just to start talking to Sammamish to see if there were other ways, other regional fixes that could happen if we chose to work together on it. But they were certainly, before the vote was certified and it was so close, they were trying to keep all their options in when they put the little sentence in the docket.
So if we go on to the agreement that was signed.
Yes.
There is a discussion in there of the roadway.
Yes.
And when we were originally talking about annexing the area, the cost of updating that road was like $18 million.
And
And there's only 3 million set aside.
well, that's in the beginning, they have to set aside 3 million. That's sort of like in real estate, they call it the,
Earnest money.
yeah,
Earnest
earnest
money.
money.
I know, but 3 million and 8 million, I just think it's going to take a long time in order to get money put together. So that road is going to be there for quite a while, just the way it is.
Right, but we wanted to be sure that, because you're right, when we had our boundary review board hearings, they were very quick to testify how quickly they could fix the road, and that they wouldn't need any money from the state, so we put a lot of that into the agreement that they stated at the boundary review board hearings, that they were going to fix the road relatively fast, they weren't going to take the state credit for annexing, and so we just made sure that they were, that they...
Doesn't that say it, that they're going to go and ask for funds?
They can ask for funds for the road, but they can't ask for state funds to help them service this area. There are funds that we were going to use that would help you in the first few years to provide services. But they said that one of the reasons that they should be able to annex Klahanie is because they didn't need the money to help do the services.
That's the money they didn't need.
That's the money they didn't need.
I thought it wasn't available anymore. I thought you had to take it in a certain time frame.
You did, but we just wanted to be sure that if it should ever be available, or if it should ever be that we keep them to what they said.
So does anybody else have any questions? Any ideas? You all read the scratch up?
Do you have a guesstimate? I'm just curious, it's not going to make a difference in regards to what we're going to do probably, but what was the voter turnout? Did they get a guesstimate of, it only lost by 30-some votes, but
right.
was there only, 67
did.
people voting or something, or did they have a high percentage of response?
It was, see on my other PowerPoint, I had we had the numbers when we talked to council about it, but it was less than, what did you say?
It's less than 50%.
Right. It was a smaller, for as excitable as the area was, I was surprised that the turnout wasn't as high enough, right?
Well, the turnout, and I, by the way, my name is Mike Foss, I'm in the PAA, and the turnout was quite good. The turnout was in the 50+% voted. So, yeah, I mean, the response was strong. I mean, I've got to be honest, and I will state up front, I was very, very active in the pro-Issaquah side of the campaign, and watched the whole process. If you look at that, the northern end of the PAA is very much attached to Sammamish. The smaller part, I'm in one of those areas or districts that are, I think we came in at the highest, 74.8% or something like that. It was very high
It's for the south
in terms of yes. And so, we were disappointed, but that's okay. It happens. Those things happen. Yeah, it was a good turnout.
There are other questions? Sure.
One, was there any discussion during the council meetings as far as what would happen if the vote comes down similarly over a number of years for Sammamish? In essence, Klahanie refusing to annex, is there any provisions for the PAA reverting back or being potentially renegotiated?
If it came to that, that was one of the reasons they talked about not splitting it, because they were afraid that if it split, it would be hard to get the rest of them to come into Sammamish, because there'd be fewer that would be voting, fewer to take it over the top. But we were open that if they can't get it annexed for whatever reason, if Klahanie is just separated and they can't make up their mind, then we would be happy to look at it again if, in 10 years it still is out there in King County. Because I think the Klahanie folks just desperately want to be with the city. They want police protection. They want to treated like a real city, whereas, because King County hasn't really been a good steward for them. So I think if it happened, if 10 years are out and they still aren't able to annex for whatever reason, I think we would probably entertain, trying it again, talking to Sammamish and finding out what's the problem, where is it going wrong. I think we would always, because we're the only other ones that could take it. It has to be one of the jurisdictions.
Just an FYI to that comment, I recently attended a meeting on the other side of the spectrum with Sammamish, had a conversation with one of their key executives, and there is a concern, to be very honest with you, because the vote for annexation was 49.6, 50.4, or something in that number. I can't exactly get the correct number. Now, they're not going to go for the bonded indebtedness, but they still have to get 50 plus 1. And I had a long conversation with one of their people that was like, how do you feel? Do you think they're going to go for it? Do you think the people in Klahanie are going to step up? And he was concerned about, will they go to the polls? Will we get the same kind of turnout? So there is a concern, and they're going to campaign, from what I can see, pretty aggressively to try and convince the voters in the PAA to go with Sammamish. But there is a serious concern that, because all they have to get is 50%. If they lose people that don't go to the polls, because they don't know when that's going to happen. It could be September, it could be August, it could be November, if they don't get the people to go, or if there's a contingent of the group that still wants to, believe it or not, stay in King County, which I have trouble understanding, having lived there. They've got some concern about, will it hit the 50%? If it doesn't go 50 plus 1, the PAA stays in King County. And then
Until somebody can take it.
until somebody steps up, or the state forces King County to dispense of their
Right,
annexation areas. So,
right,
The continuing saga of Klahanie.
yes.
I just want to clarify, you talked about it passing back. To do that, we'd have to go through a similar process. I mean,
Absolutely.
because what we're doing is we're officially releasing it, so it'd be a very long, involved process. It's not just, okay, we'll take it back now, you guys didn't make it.
Right.
It'd be another, process of everybody agreeing and passing
Right.
that back.
It'd
which
be
is,
just the
I think
opposite.
would be pretty hard to happen after they voted it down twice here.
Right,
So-
because they would have to release it,
Yeah.
we would have to take it, King County would have to, it would be a lot of deja
It's not
vu.
just, oh, you didn't
Right.
get it, we'll take it back.
Right.
Well, could it
Yes.
just stay as King County? I mean, what's
It could, the thing is, the piece of growth management, though, is that all these potential annexation areas are supposed to be within a city within the 20 years, because then the services are more efficient to provide, all that good stuff. But
So
some of them are just
stand up.
harder than
Great.
others.
Considering what we are voting on, the fact that in public comment there's nobody here, and the fact that the mayor seems to have negotiated what I think is a good deal, and the fact that this annexation issue has come up several times, has been voted down several times, and it seems clear that if you take Klahanie as a whole, not just the southern part, they're not in favor of it. So why not approve what the mayor negotiated and what the council is asking for, and let's get on with it.
Is that a motion?
I so move.
Any further discussion?
Do you want to open the public hearing, just so Susan can write it down?
Yeah.
We will continue the discussion after the public hearing.
Thank you. I forgot we didn't open it.
So I will officially open the public hearing at 6:59. And seeing that there is nobody that is willing to make any comments, I will officially close the public hearing at 6:59 and a half.
Duly noted.
So, getting back to the discussion, is there any further discussion? All those in favor of accepting what the council has approved, not the council, the mayor. and the
Releasing
two-
the-
Mayor of the two cities have approved as is presented here tonight. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And the second motion, that someone should make is to allow the chairperson to sign the findings of fact. Or if there's any issues with the findings of fact that you would want to change or edit or anything.
Since you had no further questions, I assumed that you had read and that was approved along with it. So if I need a motion to allow me to sign as accepting what is been presented.
I moved it, you accept, sign. Be able to
Sec-
sign it.
Do I have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. Good job. Good job, your first public hearing.
Must not like
Jason.
you. They used to come to my public hearings.
Hi there, I'm Jason Rogers. I work with Trish in the Development Services Department. I know most of you haven't met me yet because I wasn't here 2 weeks ago, but here I am. And tonight I'll be talking about the next couple of elements in our comprehensive plan periodic update, the utilities and public services element and the capital facilities element. So just a quick refresher, that's a typo. We're going to understand the elements I just mentioned, and we'll go through the list of goals for those two elements. Just a quick refresher, you saw this 2 weeks ago. This is the new format we're using for the comprehensive plan with the introduction, vision, GMA requirements, and then working down through the list. And then the basics again, just a quick refresher with what a goal is, and how we get down through policies and then implementation. So first up, we'll do the utilities and public services element. And so what we're looking at is just the high-level things. We're not looking at specific policies or implementation tonight. So this is important because the utilities and public services element really tries to address all of our utilities within the city, and this includes, the water, sewer, stormwater, but also utilities like the private utilities to the extent we can, our public services like police and fire protection. And also the element addresses how the city proposes to provide services to areas of the city that are not served, and there are a couple, and also how the city would propose to serve potential annexation areas should they come into the city. So the vision for the utilities and public services element has 4 elements to it, and you can see them on the screen here, and they're also in your packet. The city will ensure its utilities are maintained and improved while minimizing disruptions to affected areas when utility improvements and new construction are required. We will coordinate utilities and public facilities to ensure needed utility services will be available when development occurs. We will encourage utility conservation efforts that minimize demand for natural resources, and we will provide efficient and cost-effective public services. So we try to do all these things today, of course. You see, so for example, the second one there, through the development process, we coordinate, developers need to extend water lines and sewer lines. They need to work with Puget Sound Energy to extend natural gas and power lines into these new developments so that they can get served by the full range of utilities that everybody else has. We ensure that there's solid waste service when new developments come in, and we work to make sure that, apartments have an appropriate place for all the waste containers. One of the big things we have to do is it's not just trash, it's also recycling, it's also the food waste, the compost, which can result in some pretty big spaces to put these bins. And that's been something we've had to be very mindful of, especially with all the development going on. Does anybody have comments on this, questions? Okay. Oh.
Third element, the city will encourage utility conservation efforts that minimize demand for natural resources. Is there any thought on updating that to include some kind of green specifics there? 2 words that come to mind, carbon neutrality and zero impact initiatives.
That's something we can certainly look into. So the Office of Sustainability has been working on a carbon plan. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but they call it the carbon wedge. It's just a big wedge-shaped thing where it shows here, and the baseline is 2007, it shows here's the amount of carbon emissions the city has as of '07, and if you project the growth we've had historically, it goes up like this. The objective is to reduce, instead of growing that much, to reduce by 50% the city's carbon impact over a 50-year period. And so that's something that we're certainly working on in a big picture sense, but the ways of getting there, of course, are many and varied. But that's definitely something we can look into adding.
Right, and the land use element that we did 2 weeks ago has the carbon emissions goal in it, and it talks about the King County target that we're supposed to hit, and I think we just adopted that one outright, that we're in alignment with the same one that the county is, which is it 0 and 80 by 2000?
Yeah, I think.
But that was a big one that we adopted several years ago when we first started working on the carbon plan.
Yeah.
And there would be certainly implementations, like you mentioned, of specific things that we can do to help get that number down. That'll be in there.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, so that's the vision. These are the GMA requirements. They might sound a little dry, but these come directly out of the, these come out directly out of the Growth Management Act. The first one is, you've also seen the first one in the land use element because it sits there too, but because it talks about public facilities and services, it also ends up in the utilities and public services element because we need to ensure that all the elements are connected together, that all the elements are working in concert. So that's one of the requirements that also comes through. The second one there is ensure that those public facilities that are necessary to support development shall be adequate to serve the development at the time. So this gets at the concurrency thing that you'll hear a lot more about concurrency when you hear about the transportation element, because that's where concurrency is mostly focused. But concurrency also applies to all the other utilities and public services, that we need to have sufficient, we need to have enough of these services to meet the needs of the people we've got and the people who are coming in. And then the last one, and this is very specific to the utilities and public services element, is we need to show the general location and proposed location of all of our existing proposed utilities. In practice, so in the current comprehensive plan, there's a very generalized map showing a lot of these things. Going forward, we're planning to not have that directly in the plan because that's a document that changes quite a bit. We do water main replacements, we add new sewer lines constantly. That's easier to maintain as a separate document that we incorporate by reference into the plan so that we can just keep it up without having to come back to the Planning Policy Commission and the City Council every year saying, okay, here's all the new lines we added, let's update the map. That's kind of silly and not the best use of all of our time. But any comments on, or questions, I guess, on these? All right, so the goals here are broken down into categories. So the first several here are general ones, and these are intended to apply to all of the various utilities as a whole and how we want to have service provision within the city. So the first one, you can see, facilitate the development of all utilities and public services at the appropriate levels to accommodate Issaquah's planned growth. This is obviously a very, it doesn't sound like much, but it's very significant because we don't want people to not have water. We want to make sure that when people come in, we have enough water to serve them. One of the examples of forward-looking we've done is, we're a part of Cascade Water Alliance, and there's the regional water line that comes down Newport Way from Bellevue to help provide water to Issaquah. That big water line is providing water to the Highlands today because we didn't have enough water from the city wells to be able to provide water to the Highlands. So that's one of those long-range planning things that we had to do to ensure that we had appropriate utility services. For sewer, there's been a lot of improvements made to the metro system. Brightwater is a good example. None of our sewage goes to Brightwater, but sewage that formerly went to the Renton plant, which is where our sewage goes, now goes to Brightwater. So that's a big regional thing. Obviously, we were involved in that too. Yes.
Is there anywhere in the plan that tells us what the appropriate level of these utilities are?
Yes, there is. So it's not, so for all of the various utilities, like the water utility or the sewer utility, there's actually a separate system plan which is maintained by the Public Works Engineering Department, and it has very specific measures about, for example, how many gallons per minute of water flow needs to be available, both for domestic consumption and for fire flow, just for one example. So it's very, very specific about how much storage you need, how much flow you need, where you need to have mains. We incorporate that plan by reference into the comprehensive plan, but again, because that's a document it's a very technical document, it's also hundreds of pages long, it would make the comprehensive plan a lot thicker than it is. So the details exist.
So, if you look at the population growth,
Mhm.
in the next 15 years, the city is going to go from 32,000 to 55,000
Yes.
in 15 years. When the city, when they're doing the planning, are they actually looking at how they're going to get to be able to support 55,000 people? Or are they taking it in chunks?
Well, I mean, the growth isn't all going to happen at once. It would obviously happen over a period of years, and so
Over 15 years is what your number said.
right. And so we would make incremental improvements. We're not drawing, for example, fully on the Cascade Water Alliance pipeline right now. Like I said, it's only serving the Highlands. There's another intertie to help us serve Talus and tie into the rest of the city. So, we've planned ahead in the past. We'll continue to plan ahead in the future to ensure that, we need to be able to accommodate this growth. And, if you look at the population chart, there's zero people, zero housing units in the urban core today. And the plan is to have 6,000 some odd in 17 years. So that's definitely something we're aware of and are thinking about how we're going to do it.
Okay. You got a plan.
We have a plan.
So you got a plan, so.
Right, and part of the central plan was making sure that we had enough water for those growth targets.
And that's hard to do, I understand. You don't know what is going to be
Yeah.
there, but you have to have some idea while you're putting in a main over here, will it feed and eventually feed off of that and all of the things put together?
Yeah.
They use our targets when they update their water and sewer plan. So
Okay.
we're working together on it.
So I've looked through the plan, and the only real question I have relates to the sewage flow estimations. And
Okay. Ahead a little.
so I see that we have a 2001 estimate of 1 million gallons per day, with an
Yes.
estimate of 2 million gallons per day by 2020. Do you know, one, where we're at currently, and two, what our capacity is?
I don't know right now. The most recent sewer system plan you've probably seen there is actually from quite some time ago, although it's next on PWE's list to update. The good news about sewer flows is that they very closely mirror water flows, because what goes in comes back out most of the time. So, so long as it makes the math somewhat easy in that if we're accounting for the water flow properly, we know how much sewer flow we need to account for. One of the things to address that, of course, is, like I said, there's been some improvements made to a Metro main interceptor line. Metro's made all these big improvements. Obviously, one of the things we generally require is that development pay for the extension of the various lines to serve their development. So we're definitely accounting for it. But like I said, I don't know exactly where we are with these numbers at the moment. We'll find out, though.
Anything else?
Jason, just from a grammatical point, is there any way to break up that extremely long run-on sentence so that it reads a little easier?
Yes, we can definitely do that.
Thank you.
These are a lot of these are in the existing element, and this element doesn't get updated that often, but yes. Okay, so I'll move on to the next ones here. These are some more of the general goals here. So process permits and approvals for utilities, quickly. And then the plan should be integrated to ensure that we have services available to support development that's consistent with the land use plan. So this is more of that integration with the land use element I was mentioning earlier. And also that we need to have a process because, like I said, most of our new infrastructure is built by developers to our specifications, but it's built by them when they develop. And so we need to make sure that those permits get processed quickly so that utilities aren't holding development up. Make sense? Okay. So this is the goal specific to the water utility. And this talks about, and maybe this would be an area where we could take Carl's suggestion and break this up because you can see it's actually got several things going on in it. It's talking about protecting the aquifer, reliable levels of service, make sure we're taking care of future supplies. So this could easily be broken up into multiple individual goals that have individual policies to support them, or we can keep it all as one big goal. I don't know if anybody has a preference that way or if it would read better one way or another.
Well, reading these, it just seems like anytime you start using the word by, then anything after that to me is a policy. But, I mean, it seemed to me that you provide for the city's long-term water needs, period. That's the goal. And then all the rest would be, here's how we're going to do it.
Okay.
And I would, second that concern. Most everything in there, except for the very end, conservation and reuse measures, I look at that as more of a overarching goal to make sure we're planning for the needs, but also planning for conservation measures and, like I said, green and zero impact measures. So it seems like we could shorten that to provide for the city's long-term water needs while ensuring conservation and reuse measures or conservation and zero impact measures are provided for.
Yeah. One thing that's, and we don't really mention it, but one thing that's very complicated with the utilities element is, and you don't see it here, but so we put the goal here, and then there's a giant list, and for water there are 34 individual policies, and these policies are all in the water system plan. And the water system plan update recently got approved by the city council, and so it's a bit of a chicken and egg issue where the comprehensive plan and the system plan need to be consistent, but which one comes first? And do you need all these individual policies, and where do they fall? So that's going to be one of the challenges we have specific to utilities. It's not really present in any of the other elements because they don't generally have council-approved other documents floating around. The Central Issaquah Plan is one example. Obviously, the land use element will be consistent there. And so I only mention that in that, yes, like some of these things here sound policy-like, and there's all this huge list of policies that we have to somehow figure out how to accommodate. So we'll definitely work on that and talk more about conservation and try to shorten these up.
I know you said earlier that we hadn't prepared well enough or something like that for when the Highlands was developed, that we had to rely on Cascade or they had an intertie.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious about our ability to be self-reliant. If something ever happened, that we could provide our water ourselves rather than rely on Cascade.
So as of today, the city actually does have sufficient water rights to do that if we were to somehow lose Cascade water, but that that would be a temporary measure. We have, and this water system plan talks about in a lot more detail about exactly what the city's water rights are and how much they can provide per day. And there are some frankly some pretty strict limits on how much water we can draw from our wells today. And we have to be to work in concert with Smash Plateau Water and Sewer District because several of their wells are very close to several of our wells. So if we both start drawing up the straw, the water level drops and nobody gets any water. So it's a complicated balancing act, of course. So certainly an emergency at the moment we can accommodate it, but for future growth, we definitely need another water source. One of the options frankly, would be to attempt to acquire additional water rights, but that's a long, complicated process with the Department of Ecology. And from a policy standpoint, the city has elected to join together with the other member cities of Cascade to develop other sources.
I want to piggyback on his question. What about the parts of Issaquah that are on the Bellevue water system?
Right, over in Montreux is.
Right.
On,
So
when we annexed it, it was.
So the general answer there is Montreux's water. So Montreux's water supply comes from Bellevue, although the physical infrastructure belongs to this city. Greenwood Point South Cove is completely Bellevue. Bellevue owns the infrastructure. Bellevue supplies the water. We're currently in the beginning stages of talking to Bellevue about assuming their portions of the system within our city limits, because the Growth Management Act calls for the cities to provide those urban public services within their boundaries. That's where we had the thing with Sammamish Plateau the last couple of years that's been negotiated about. Like I said, we're talking to Bellevue about doing that. I don't know the long-term plans as to how that water supply would continue. Right now what happens is Bellevue has a meter on the intertie, and they bill us for how much water, and that is passed through to the individual utility customers.
Before we move on, I want to go back to Paul's comment about the Highlands, and it was a phased development agreement for 20 years, and so it wasn't that we weren't ready for them to grow. We wouldn't let them grow. Like, for example, they got to have 500 homes before the interchange was built, and they couldn't get any more until we built the interchange with them. And we wouldn't let them get a certain amount of houses after that 500 until we had a regional water solution figured out. So we used them and that sort of leverage to have them help us partner to get the intertie, because they couldn't grow any farther until they had the water. And then we would let them have people move into the houses. So it was sort of a phased 20-year plan that we helped, and the developer helped leverage the water service, because we weren't going to let them have houses until that was all figured out. Okay. So I just wanted to sort of flip it the other way around, is that's how we got the intertie. Was we worked with the developer because we knew that they wanted to have water for their folks, and we knew that we couldn't provide water until we had the service. So we did that together.
Jason, we talked about sewers.
Yeah.
In here says that you would add more sewers. Where in the city would you be adding?
So I'll skip ahead. I'll put the sewer utility here. So we have sewer lines within the city. We have pump stations in various places, and the whole, for those who aren't technically inclined, the whole concept of sewers is the stuff flows downhill, as you might suspect. So the whole idea is to get it all to flow downhill into the various big, and we're talking really big metro sewer lines, and those sewer lines transport it to the treatment plants. The lines are generally underneath our roads. There are standards for which side of the road which things go on, so they're very careful with that. And the sewer system plan talks about, for example, there's a deficiency in this one area, and so long-term we'll need to correct that for more development, or maybe this sewer line is very old, so we'll need to replace that in the next 5 years. So these things we are counting for these things, and again, like Trish is saying, we also get the developers to help us pay for this, and in some cases we can even say, before you can do anything, you need to install the sewers. So one example is, we, generally speaking, will not let anybody in the city develop on a septic system for a variety of policy reasons, stemming from Seattle King County Public Health to local city policy. And so before you can get a certificate of occupancy for example, a single-family house, you need to have a sewer line plugged in.
No, I just meant, is there any area of the city now that is not on sewer system?
Yeah. Sycamore.
Sycamore.
Where?
Sycamore?
Sycamore.
Yeah, parts of the Sycamore neighborhood are the biggest example.
And is the Lewis Lane still not?
I don't know about Lewis Lane. I know, so I know the lower parts of Sycamore that are close to the creek are not. I think parts of Lewis Lane still might not be. The stuff above Sycamore up on the hillside is generally served by sewer, because one came in through the Sunrise Project some number of years ago.
they're not on big enough lots up there to be on the septic, so.
Correct.
Okay.
Oh, up the hill,
Overdale?
Overdale, thank you, is also on septic. Although that's within Sammamish Plateau Water Sewer District's service area, and so the city's utility does not serve that. So that's something that Sam Platt addresses. Okay, so this is,
I have a question also.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar to the water question that I had, but just kind of looking regionally. Has there ever been a discussion of a treatment plant so we can be more self-reliant? I'm just kind of curious of history, discussions of that.
so that goes, I can hit, so that goes all the way back, frankly, to the 60s and 70s, where back, and I hate to go all the way back that far, but back then, individual cities largely were dumping, we were on a lot of septic systems, individual cities were having to take their sewage and do something with it, whether they were treated or simply just dumping it straight into rivers and lakes. And so what we ended up with was Lake Washington, for example, was severely polluted, and a variety of communities and business people got together and formed the municipality of Metropolitan Seattle, Metro. They built the West Point treatment plant. They built the Renton treatment plant. They have built today it's King County, and they built Brightwater. So we deal with sewage treatment regionally, partly because these plants are extremely expensive. Brightwater alone cost over $1 billion. And of course it's designed to serve a very large service area, a lot of people, but it's basically cost prohibitive for Issaquah to go it alone. It could be done, but I think you'd see a massive jump in sewer rates.
It'd take a lot of land, too.
Yeah, and we'd have to find someplace to put it.
Right.
I don't think there's a lot of vacant land.
Right, I just wanted to see what, and
It's
if there was
a
any
huge
kind
driver
of
of
discussion.
land use. Back before the Highlands, back when it was Grand Ridge, in the county, they had approved 500 platted 5-acre homes. And they came to the city and said, what do you think about 500 septic systems right over your aquifer? We just got it approved. You don't want to talk to us about maybe another kind of development there? We'll help you with the interchange. We'll, do some mixed use, and we'll have it on a sewer system. Because we were just, couldn't believe that, but, King County, they're rural, that, septic is fine, but we thought it's right over our aquifer. What could go wrong? Well, a lot of things could go wrong. So that helped us start the negotiation with the developer, because they were already approved in King County and were ready to start pumping septic systems in the plat. So it's a huge driver of land use.
There was a discussion a couple years ago, quite a few years ago, about building some kind of a plant over where at the base of Issaquah Hobart Road, not Issaquah Hobart, Issaquah Pine Lake Road, in that area. Wasn't there a big discussion and people were upset they were going to build some kind of a treatment plant over there?
There was a surface water, a pond, a retaining.
No, it was
I haven't ever
some
heard that.
kind of a,
Yeah.
okay.
Of septic and sewer?
No, I don't know what, I don't
Oh,
remember
think
what
there
it was, but it was
stormwater
going to be
ponds
a,
that were going to go in there. Infiltration
Okay.
ponds?
it was going to be something that had a lot of smoke coming out of it, and I can't remember what the process was. I just thought maybe you remembered.
No.
Okay.
Does that sound familiar to you?
No.
I'll think about
My
it.
my history isn't
I'll
as
wake
long
up
as
tonight
Trish's,
and
though.
remember.
Right.
Now-
I just wanted to see if it was the sewage treatment plant that they were going to put in there.
Yeah,
I don't think it was. It was something else.
You had mentioned that any new developments have to be on the sewer system. Is there any sort of exemption available if you are making a zero impact development or just a single family home making it zero impact? Is there any way to keep something off the sewer system if someone has the ability?
The general answer is no. Sewage, and I understand what you're getting at, because and I know that there's things like composting toilets and ways to deal with that, but the general, under GMA, we have policies about providing sewers, and so we have to do that. It's highly unlikely you could get that signed off by Seattle-King County Public Health or the city. Not to say that somebody couldn't try, but even Z-Home, for example, which is the whole net zero idea with energy, and also, they try to be very conservative with water use. They're on city sewers, and they do dump wastewater down the city sewers. So
The lot has to be a certain size, and I don't think there's any builder that would put in houses that are far enough away, about an acre of land or whatever the size is that they're going to have to put in. I don't think that would happen.
anybody else on sewers? Okay. Surface water drainage or stormwater. Again, a very, very long looking goal here. We can certainly try to break this up, but you can see built into this that there's been several plans over the last 20, 30 years that talk about stormwater runoff. The Central Issaquah Plan has to address stormwater. The Raleigh Development Agreement, for example, addresses stormwater. It is one of the big deals here, especially because stormwater goes ultimately into our waterways, into Issaquah Creek, into Lake Sammamish, and we need to ensure that, first of all, we're controlling the outflows so that we're not getting a lot of erosion or we're not flooding things downstream. We need to make sure water quality is high enough so that we're protecting the creek and the lake for salmon and other wildlife, and also all the plant life. We do work a lot. So one of the implementation strategies that comes down from this goal is the newer versions of the surface water design manual that Issaquah uses do call for a lot of low impact development techniques, trying to infiltrate water where possible, whether it's through rain gardens or some other method. So we do the best we can, but for example, on the valley floor here, the water table is not down that far, and so infiltration is difficult here, and especially when it rains a lot, the water table starts creeping up. So we do what we can, but we still need to make sure that we have adequate provision for stormwater here so that we don't get flooding and other habitat damage. Okay. Private utilities. So this is where it starts to get a very, very broad and general because, of course, we don't directly control the private utilities. So you can see the goal here is just coordinate our land use and utility planning to ensure consistency and also to let the providers themselves meet their obligations. So you could certainly try to build a house without a connection to the power grid. I've seen it done, not in Issaquah, but I've seen it done. But generally speaking, we're talking about houses that are going to have to be connected to power. They're going to have natural gas. They're going to have a cable line or a telephone line or maybe both. And so we need to ensure that those providers, Comcast, Pure Sound Energy, Broadstripe, Quest, that our planning is consistent with their planning and that they can get in and to provide the utilities that they provide. Okay, solid waste. This is implemented through...
Actually, can we go back to the private utilities section real quick here? It's my understanding that the Highlands, when they went through their development, was able to also bring in, what's the word I'm looking for? The fiber networks. And I don't see that addressed in the telecommunication or cable or anything to address maybe expansion of that. Yeah,
and we've actually gotten a couple of comments about that, or about similar issues, and the city actually, the city actually just went through, or commissioned a task force recently to talk about technology infrastructure, and so you don't see it in here, but we're going to be pulling that task force's recommendations and trying to pull them into this a little better. Because I know that recommendation talks about things like fiber and Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi and things like that. So it didn't make it into this version, but we're aiming to get that involved so that you guys can take a better look at it.
Right, because that got into the central plan.
Yeah.
So that would be able to trickle into this as well. Good question, good comment.
All right, back to solid waste. So this is a very long thing. We'll again look to cut this down a little bit, but there's a lot of things going on here. Of course, we don't want trash piling up in the street. We're also looking. One of our big sustainability goals is to get as high a percentage of so-called waste diversion as possible, which is to say we're trying to send as little to the landfill as we absolutely can. We want to recycle things, we want to compost things, we want to even just reduce the amount of solid waste we're sending, period, by having people be more efficient by using different packaging. And so that's why you see, you know, we have the plastic bag ban, the various food packaging requirements. You know, people can't use foam containers because those things go straight to the landfill eventually. And so that's one way we're implementing this. There's other things we can do, clearly, but this is the big picture goal to try to help get us there. I don't know if you think anything's missing or we should delete some things from this.
Not anything that's necessarily missing per se. I did notice that the future conditions involve trying to reduce the collection of waste and divert it off to recycling and composting. What strategies are being looked at for that currently that may make it into the plan but aren't necessarily in this one?
So some of us, like I mentioned before, we're aggressively pushing recycling. We've implemented a food waste program. We encourage people to compost, you know, in their own backyards if they want to, and we help provide, you know, provide help for people to do that. What else? I don't know I can't remember exactly what the Cleanscapes contract calls for example. I can definitely check with the Office of Sustainability and find out though.
Okay. Yeah, and the reason I'm asking is, you know, until recently I was living in the city of Seattle, and I know that for developments in those areas, there's random spot checks of recycling to ensure that waste isn't being recycled and recyclable material isn't being thrown into waste with a monetary penalty that essentially gets passed down to the renters in those developments, and that may be something that could be looked at.
Definitely. Okay, public services. So this one, and this goal starts relating to the capital facilities element as well, and all the utility goals kind of do in their own way, but this one very much gets at it because this is talking about how we provide or ensuring that we're providing sufficient police and fire and emergency medical services and coordinating that with our land use decisions, and that we have adequate, and that it says at the bottom that we've made adequate provision to accommodate the demands of new development. That can mean we need to buy more police cars and hire more police officers, or maybe build a new fire station, things like that. Okay. This one, essential public facilities, there is a list of essential public facilities that are listed in state law. These are things like, well, help me out, Trish.
Airports is the first
Yeah.
one, I think.
Airports, sound transits, high capacity transit is another essential public facility.
Wastewater treatment plants are,
Yeah.
it's really anything that a community needs, but it's hard to cite because of land use issues and neighborhood issues. So they're usually big, smelly sometimes. I think sex offender housing is one of them. But they're the tough things to cite that everybody needs, the regional things. So they put it in the state regulations that you had to provide for them. They just said, quit doing the NIMBY thing. You all have to provide for them if we cite one there.
Yeah.
So
you can see the goal just talks about, well, state law says we have to provide for a process for it. The goal says we have to provide a process for it. And we do implement this. We have a process. Fortunately, we haven't had to use it.
right, fortunately.
Information technology, this gets back to your question about private utilities and other IT things. We'll be updating this with some of the recommendations from the task force that I mentioned earlier, because this is very generic, but we're going to want to have some very solid policies to back this up. Okay. So that's utilities and public services. One down, one to go. So now we're on to capital facilities. And so here's the vision for, for capital facilities. And it's lengthy, and hopefully you've all had a chance to see it in the packet. And I'm wondering if anybody has feedback on things we should add or things we should take away, or things or you can even wordsmith it if you want. Some of the things you see here are coming from state law, because state law provides for that we have to do certain things when it comes to capital facilities and providing for how we pay for the needs of growth. So that's just a little bit of extra background on the vision. And I'll get to that stuff in a moment. Okay. So these are the GMA requirements, and they're quite specific and can be tricky to implement. So we have to have an inventory. Currently, there is a map in the existing capital facilities element. This is something we'd probably be pulling out of the element itself and adopting by reference. And I'll get to a few more details on that in a moment. We have to have a forecast of future needs. So this is where the growth target comes into play and how we're projecting growth, because most of so we have levels of service for all the various capital facilities, police and fire and utilities, and for general government and for parks, transportation, all these things. And so this help informs us to determine, well, how much do we need? How much investment do we need to make going forward? Another thing we have to have is the proposed location and capacities of these new facilities. So we need to have a plan that shows where are we going to build new roads over the next 6-7 years. We have that. It's the Transportation Improvement Plan. You can see where we're planning to build roads. We also, in the capital facilities plan, we lay out, okay, we need to buy 2 new police cars in this year to accommodate growth, for example, and things on like that. Or we need to we need to build out this new park. Confluence Park's a great example. We started building that out. It's a great new park for the city. Next thing, and I mentioned it before, we have to have a 6-year plan to finance these necessary capital facility investments, and we have to show how we would pay for it. That's the tricky part. And then we have to have policies to reassess the land use element if we don't have enough money. Because we have to keep the land use element, capital facilities, we have to keep all this stuff consistent. So the trick here, though, is it says we have to have policies to reassess the land use element, but it doesn't actually say that we need to change the land use element. And then there's some other requirements that play into this, and these are related to the impact, the state law about impact fees. This city charges impact fees, and so because we do that, we have these extra 3 requirements. So we have to identify the deficiencies in public facilities serving our existing development and how we would correct those deficiencies. So we have the city's 33,000 people today. Maybe we're short on parks. We have to identify how do we make up the shortfall in parks capacity. With our own funding, we can't fund that through impact fees, and so that's number 1. The second thing is we have to identify demands placed on the existing facilities by new development. So how would new development, for example, impact the police station across the street? How would it impact the memorial field behind the police station? And then finally, we have to identify what we would need to do to serve the new development that we can't serve with our existing facilities. And that's where the impact fee comes into play, because we can charge the impact fee for those growth facilities. But we can't charge an impact fee to correct the existing deficiencies. So we just replaced Station 72, Fire Station 72 over near the Transit Center recently. That was not paid for by impact fees because that is serving existing population and correcting, if you will, an existing deficiency because they were in a pretty ramshackle building across the street. So now we're into the goals, and this is kind of the general goal for capital facilities, and that's we have to provide adequate services and facilities which exist address the existing deficiencies and future needs. So this is just pulling all those GMA requirements right back into one big goal. It talks about, you can see level of service, realistic timelines, has to be sustainable. This might also be a good time. We attach this to your packet at the end. In today's capital facilities element, there's a whole lot of tables, very number-filled tables, talking about level of service. And this is the analysis we do to see where are we at? What do we need to add in future years? Where might we have deficiencies today? The proposal is to pull all of these tables out of the capital facilities element because, as Trish mentioned in her introduction, we can only amend the comp plan once every year. And unfortunately, the timings of when we adopt the capital facilities plan, when we adopt the budget, and when the comp plan gets amended every year don't line up. And so what we're trying to do is to align all of our capital facility planning at one time. Usually the capital facilities plan is adopted in June or July. And so by pulling it directly out of the capital facilities element, by keeping it adopted by reference, we can continually update this as the information becomes available, and we can still refer to it, but we're not locked into this once a year update cycle that state law mandates. So you can see it talks about, and it's got targets for, how many fire stations we need. What's that based off? It talks about how much water flow do we need for fire mains. It talks about the current transportation standards and level of service.
Yeah, and I actually had one question on the fire level of service standards, table CF5 on page 41.
Yeah.
It currently looks like we have been running and are currently running a
massive deficits.
Pretty severe asset deficit. And I was wondering, as far as the calculation goes, I know, certain stations, Station 71 being a prime example, usually have anywhere from 2 to 3 operational apparatus there. I believe
right.
It's Aid 71, Engine 71, and Engine 71A, depending on whether it's in the shop or not.
Right.
Are these apparatus numbers calculated on staffed apparatus? For instance, there's one crew there of 3 that operates both the aid car and the fire.
Yeah.
So is that 1, or is that counted as 2?
So where fire level service gets really tricky is, and the notes don't always come through, but the fire level of service was actually, for the city of Issaquah, was actually adopted all the way back in 1999, shortly before the formation of Eastside Fire and Rescue. And so what this is showing is what would the city need to have an independent fire agency. Because we're a member of Eastside Fire, we have access to other assets. So the level of service analysis shows this deficiency. It doesn't really exist because if they have a big problem, they're going to call in units from elsewhere. And Eastside Fire maintains their own level of service standards that show, are they meeting response time? Do they have enough apparatus? Things like that. So this is a little bit misleading, but this is a good way to show, well, say we wanted to form our own fire department. Well, here's what it'd take. Okay.
And now, is this something that we, under the GMA, has to be individualized, or can we reference the EFR numbers and integrate the two to show what we're actually at?
We need to have it separate, unfortunately. So it's like he's just talking about, the fire one is one of the most complicated ones because of that. Because we need to do it solely for Issaquah and can't worry about the fact that Eastside Fire is also Fire District 10, Fire District 38, City of Sammamish, City of North Bend. So, that's something that's not easy to take into account.
Right. But for example, along that same point, when we did the study to annex Klahanie, we actually used the numbers from Eastside Fire and Rescue to figure out what we would need to do as a city to serve that new area, because we know that the way that GMA has us calculate it wouldn't have been a true calculation of what we really would need to do to serve it. So we actually went through the district and worked with them and their numbers and whose apparatus and whose fire station was closer to figure that part out, because that's the real service provision, not on the numbers, on the books thing. So there are 2 different ways to use the numbers.
Yeah. One thing I'll point out, the tables you see that I pulled out, these are the tables as they existed in essentially last year's comprehensive plan update. These numbers have not been updated based on the population chart that Trish showed you earlier, because, like I said, we're going to pull all these out. And also, we don't have a 2014 population estimate from the state yet. That'll be coming in another month or month and a half. So we'll certainly update all these tables when we get the right numbers. But for now, you're essentially seeing last year's numbers. So you'll see a 2018 projected total population of 37,000, which is not what we're showing in the population chart these days. And so that will require some investment. So you can see in the police table, you'll see a fairly large potential surplus. That can be a little misleading, though, because, like I said, first of all, the population estimate is low, and second of all, if you look at column 2, just for example, under police, the number of calls for service, total calls for service, has been staying relatively stagnant for a decade as the city's population has doubled. So, that's something to consider when you look at this, is to say, well, maybe things have, we last did the study, the level of service study a long time ago. Maybe things have changed. Maybe the police department is much more efficient, or maybe simply things are going great for Issaquah. Let's see here. Parks is one of the interesting ones here, and there's quite a few tables for this. The way we did parks is, and you can see table CF9, it's on page 44 of your packet. This lists, at the time the study was done, all the various park facilities Issaquah possess. And rather than adopting an individual level of service for each of these types of facilities, like we need to have one amphitheater per 30,000 people, we need to have, X number of square feet of community center per person. What we did instead, to give the city council more flexibility, is we totaled up the value of all these facilities and then determined how many dollars per capita do we need of parks investment, because that gives the council flexibility to invest the parks money where they see it would have the most effect. So if you were to do a strict by the individual types of park facilities, we might not have Confluence Park today, for example, because the level of service calculation would show, well, we need to build all these tot lots, we need to build some extra trails for or whatever. And instead, the council is able to focus investments where the community wants them to in a more flexible way. And this is something we're going to be looking to maintain as we redo the parks impact fee study over the next year.
And is there a column that can be added to that? I mean, I know we're showing the service levels, but is there a column that can be added to show actuals, so we have kind of a quick snapshot at where we haven't been putting those dollars?
Yeah, so the Parks Department is supposed to update their parks plan in the near future. That's been delayed a little bit due to we're between staff over there. But that's something that we'll definitely be looking at as they update the parks plan.
Right, and you're saying the inventory, so we'd know that we have 8 basketball courts or 5 soccer fields, or is that what you mean?
Yeah, exactly, because we've broken it down by what, ideally, and then split it up into the level of service standard, but I want to see where the money's actually been going.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I remember when we were going through this, council said it may be 5 years and we just want to buy land because we know the land's never going to get any cheaper. So how do you give us flexibility that we can just buy land for, until we're, don't make us buy tennis courts when we want to buy land. And so we figured out this way that it was just a per capita investment, so they could buy a lot of land when it was available and not have to buy tennis courts or whatever. So
yeah.
It was pretty creative when it first came out, when we first did it.
Definitely very impressive, and it's allowed us to snatch up the land when we can actually get it.
That's right.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's just a quick overview of the level of service calculations that we do. As I said, we're going to pull these out of the element itself and integrate them with the capital facilities plan, which is, you might also know as the capital improvement plan. And that's a document that we update annually. It's the 6-year program plus future years. And that's showing, here's the actual investments we're going to make and here's how we're going to pay for them. So this isn't a capacity example, but the Public Works Operations needs to buy a new grader, a backhoe type thing. Well, that's going to show up in that plan. And that's not a capacity improvement, but we plan out, well, we need to buy these pieces of equipment, invest in these roadways, and we plan that out over a long period of time. So level of service, I just got finished talking through this, but the goal, of course, is we need to evaluate the public facilities and services based on the population chart that that Trish showed you earlier that I just mentioned. We need to correct the existing deficiencies and address future needs. And here's where it starts to get into the weeds a little bit more, but we also talk about how we want our capital facilities to be compatible with the neighborhoods they're in. So we don't want to put this giant, shining bright metal water tank on top of Squawk Mountain. That would look pretty bad because you'd see it from all over town. So the ones up there are not bright, unpainted metal. They're painted metal, and they're not very obtrusive at all. Any other questions on this? So here we have a sustainability goal. We want to incorporate sustainable products as an integral part of all of our capital facilities. And so you see this as part of, the fire station 72. We did this. It's a LEED certified building. It's very environmentally sustainable. Eastside Fire has definitely adopted this. They're building a new fire station out on May Valley Road, well outside the city limits, but they're incorporating a lot of those same things to make that fire facility very energy efficient too. Whenever we build new facilities, we're looking to improve them. The pool's an example, even though it's not a capacity improvement. They want to do renovations to the pool because it's very energy inefficient right now. It uses a lot of power and gas to heat the water and maintain the temperature in the building. So they're looking to do some corrections to that in the future through the park bond. So that's actually all of the goals for capital facilities element. So what we'll do is we'll make a lot of changes that we mentioned. Certainly if you have any other general comments, we would love to hear them so that we can try to get them incorporated. Next time you see this, we'll have added all the various policies in it. It's going to make for a much, much longer document that you'll have to look through, and that's where you'll see all, like I mentioned, all of those utility policies that are also in the utility system plan. So you're going to see those huge lists. We'll make sure that it's going to be consistent with all the various state and regional and county requirements, and check up on with other departments like Office of Sustainability, like PWE and Parks, and we'll come back to you in about a month. Yeah.
Throughout everything, there's been some pretty broad terms like realistic timelines.
Mm-hmm.
Where do those get defined? Is that within each project, or is that within the document itself? Or?
Well, that's the beauty of growth management, is it's left up to us to determine those timelines.
Okay.
So if it's in like the transportation improvement, it would probably be within the 6 years or within the 20 years, depending on where it fits in. And so sometimes within that specific document, it's decided what the timeline is, or in the budget, it might be when it's funded. Is that the timeline?
Okay, thank you.
In a month, when you guys come back and discuss this, the policies will include the policies that were in the in the comp plans that are, like a sewer comp plan or a water comp plan. So the policies will be, you'll have that for us?
Yes.
Are we going to be able to discuss that with the, I don't know, whoever puts together the water plan or the sewer plan or the park plan?
We can definitely discuss them. Getting them changed, like I said, is a little bigger lift. But we'll check into seeing if Public Works staff can be here, so because they can talk in a lot more detail about it than I can.
Yeah.
Right, and part of it, though, is we're held to adopt what the council's already adopted in the water plan, and so there's not a lot of leeway for us to make changes to it, so, because they have to be the same. But what, did you say the sewer plan is coming next?
Yeah, the sewer plan is next on their list, although, the water plan took so long that they may, and they've got a lot of things they're trying to work through. It might take a while, but and that's part of the reason, this is the water utility goal again. That's part of the reason why the goal sounds a little bit like policies in places, because this is something we can directly affect, versus the individual policies, because like Trish said, those are council adopted. Those are much, much harder to wordsmith.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. It's like, what can we actually do here to affect change?
Right.
you know?
And can we refer to, and I should probably have asked you this offline, but since we can't change the water and the utility plans, can we just refer to them and then pull the bigger pictures out for us to
That's something we can, yeah, we can discuss that,
Okay.
because it is a big list. There's 34 water policies, for example.
Right, and as you said, you kind of ties our hands when you just have to say, oh, this was already adopted, so this goes in, and then, what's left.
Yeah.
To see
Yeah,
which
just
pieces
for
are actually the,
efficiency's sake, it's,
Yeah.
don't want to be discussing something that,
Yeah.
well, we can't do
that we
anything.
can't change,
Right.
right? And certainly we could add pieces like sustainability and the green energy kinds of things. But I don't think we can touch the
Yeah,
the ones.
it gets tricky though when, so one of the things that the city council, and it's on all of our city council agenda bills when we propose anything to the city council, is it has a place where you can list which comprehensive plan goals and policies does this particular thing you're proposing, is it consistent with? And so, when we propose, we're proposing, say, just for example, marijuana regulations, that's consistent with a couple of city or comprehensive plan policies. And so when the Public Works Department comes in and they're proposing to spend money, well, the comprehensive plan is the big document showing how we want the city to grow and change over the next 20, 30 years. And so it helps to be able to relate that back. So it's a little bit of a push-pull on, well, how much can you take out versus how much should you leave in? Because the council needs to be able to see how things are tying back into this. So, but it's something we'll definitely look into, is to see
Yeah.
what needs to be there and what
to
doesn't
see how
need to
far
be
we
there.
can go on that. That's a good.
So I think it's a little bit of, yes, it's been semi-approved, but there's always, what if you miss something? And this is the opportunity to let it go through and have one more view. And we've come up with, over the years, we have come up with things that have been changed, and it just depends on the process, so.
True.
Anything else specific or general? Get back, oops. There we go.
I'm saying, vertigo, watching a
When you come back in a month, will that be the semi-finished product?
Yes.
It won't come back after that, these issues?
You'll see it again in, what, September?
Right.
Yeah. So
I'm trying for 3 times for most of them, most of the element. This cursory overview, and then sort of to see actually with the guts in it, and then.
But just the, this one that we're looking at tonight, I know there's other issues.
Oh, I think so. I think
It'll be done, basically
in the semi. I like the semi draft.
okay.
Yeah.
It's a good category. Way to categorize it.
Yeah, we'll have, on the current plan is June 26th. There'll be another focus meeting on these 2 elements. We'll have them, like Trish said, in the semi-final form.
Art is coming back in August, so.
Right.
Yeah.
We're still trying to figure out the complete. I gave you a schedule, I think, 2 weeks ago,
It
trying
was
to
I think
figure out.
August the 11th.
Okay.
It's in my mind that
Yeah.
I work on it before then. So.
Oh, okay.
When you come back, we're still at the goal level, or are we going to get down into,
We'll show all the
Bigger.
policies. I'm not going to repeat every policy in the PowerPoint because that would make for a 100-slide PowerPoint, but we aim to include as many of the policies as we can. With the caveat that some of the utility policies are difficult to change, but the capital facilities policies, you have a pretty or relatively free hand to say, yes, this works, no, this doesn't, let's add this, let's remove that.
And what we're trying to get rid of is there's a lot of history in the utility and public service of, the towers were built at this time and this line functions with this and this water tower. And we don't need that in the comprehensive plan. We need more. That's fine for the utility plan and they need that. But we're trying to get ours as lean and mean as we can. So it's just one of the pieces that the council members or the public look at to say, what does the policy say for when we're growing? What do we need to do? Or where's the next place we need a water tower for fire flow or something? We're trying to get sort of the other stuff out of there so we have more room for just the really good stuff. but we still have to kind of sort through. Good, no more comments?
Quiet.
Yeah, quieter than land use, but still some really good comments.
So, Jason, are you done with your presentation?
I am done. That's all I have.
Thank you, you were awesome.
Thank you.
You could answer any question that we put to you, so that was really good. Thank you very much, and Trish too, you did a great job, so thank you. So,
Next time is transportation and,
I'd have to look.
I want to say land use again, but I'm not sure.
Transportation, yeah, for sure.
I
Yeah,
thought it was land use.
it might be land use
Maybe.
again. 'cause
I
that's
thought it was coming back after we had the discussion last time that it was going to come back.
Right,
Okay, so it should be an interesting summer.
another,
Yes.
it's gonna be a very
Um,
interesting summer.
So with that, unless there's any comments for the good of the order, I will call the meeting to an end at 8:05. Thank you very much.
And again, thanks again for the RSVPs. That really helped out this time. Super good. And let us know too when you get the email, or even right now, if you always want to get a paper packet, we can do that. If you're happy to view them online, that's okay too, but we just want to make it as easy for you all as possible. You'd like a paper packet always? Okay. Yay, see how it works?
Gotta look over my rug.
Okay, and I need you to,
I think I have heard 5,000.
super.
I
I do, but it's nice to have the official one in the,
Right, yeah.
it is, but I still like to go through them.